Welcome, all you guys. I'm so glad. It's so good to see you guys. I'm glad that you're here this morning, and I want you to know something. You are welcome here, and we want you to be a part. We want you to hook up. There's something that I say periodically. I say that we're glad you're here, whether you just got out of bed, or you just got out of jail. And I say that because I mean that. We are, no matter what is in the past, no matter what's going on in your life, you are welcome here. And we want you to be a part, and we want to reach out to you, and you be a part of us, and we be a part of you. So it doesn't really, a lot of that stuff doesn't matter. Soccer moms, NASCAR dads, bleeding hearts, tree huggers, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're glad that you're here today and that we can be a part. Worship is what we're about this morning. And at Sugar Grove, worship is a matter of people that have been scattered all week. People that have been out there doing the will of God and living like Jesus come together, and we gather together and we encourage each other, and we invoke the Spirit of God as He fills us and as a community of believers, and we just worship. We just let God. We want to speak to Him, and we're looking for Him to speak to us as well. So I'm glad that you're here today. And by the way, let me tell you what: being here this morning, you are in the minority of most folks in the United States of America. In fact, more and more people are not coming to church as you have this morning. And by the way, it is National Back to Church Sunday. You may think, what are you talking about that stuff for? Well, let's kind of lay that out there. In fact, there are so many people now, there's a certain group of people, a certain demographic called the nuns. And I don't mean nun, N-U-N-S, those folk Catholic ladies that don't marry and wear the habits. Nuns, N-O-N-E-S. In other words, what's your church affiliation? None is what they write. So they're called the nuns. There's more and more people that are like that. They want to believe in Jesus, and they believe that they love Jesus, but they're not going to come to church. Now, there's kind of a distinction that they make that we're going to talk about a little bit later on this morning. It's probably not quite exactly accurate, but it's there. Why do people? I mean, what is it? What's the thing? What's going on? Why do people not come to church? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, really. Some people make a move. They make a big change in their lives, and then they just never get back in the habit again. Have you ever known anybody like that? I've known folks like that. Some people quit for a while because they've gotten hurt one way or another, and so they quit for a season. Maybe they quit for a long while, and then it becomes sort of the way it feels. It feels good to not, you just sort of get out of the habit, as they sometimes say. Some people quit because they believe there's hypocrites in the church. Well, let me tell you what. Yeah, there are. There's a lot of hypocrites in church. And in fact, I want to go you one more than that. There's hypocrites everywhere. Have you all noticed that? There's hypocrites everywhere. It's not a thing that we're proud of, but I mean, they're everywhere. In fact, I don't think I've ever met a human being that does not have some part of his life at some time or another where they're pretty hypocritical, including the guy that I look at every morning when I look into the mirror. Again, I'm not proud of that. I'm looking for God to do some things with me, but man, they're just everywhere. And listen, if you're on a hypocrite hunt, and they're hard to find sometimes because we're two-faced, that's what the word literally means. We have one thing we're showing on the outside, but we're something else on the inside. That's what it means to be a hypocrite. And sometimes I can really be that way. And if you're looking for them, the best place to look is in church. It's the greatest opportunity from the songs that we sing and the things that we do. Does everybody's life match up? In every area of your life, do you live as good a life as you know that you could or should? Well, no, nobody does. But anyway, so, okay. Not going to go to church because there's hypocrites there. Some people don't go because they feel like they're being judged. And that's not fun at all. I mean, nobody wants to feel that way. And some people don't come because they're bored when they come. They'd rather suck on Kleenex. They come sit through a worship service. Has that ever been, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I've been through those kinds of things as well. So there may be a lot of reasons why folks may not come. But here's what I think really is behind all of that. People are kind of getting to the point in America where we don't come because they don't really see or appreciate the difference that church makes in life. If push comes to shove, what difference does it make if I go to church today or not? What difference is that going to make Wednesday morning or Friday night or whatever it might be? They just don't see any real connection with all of that. So let me tell you what, that's where I really want us to spend some time this morning. What difference does church make? And you know what? There's everywhere under the sun we could go with that. Because from my perspective, there's a whole lot of difference that church makes, okay? So rather than go everywhere under the sun, I want to focus on one little thing particularly, okay? I mean, we could talk about what the church has done in history. We could talk about all of that kind of stuff. And it's because of Jesus, right? That's our King. That's our leader, and that's the follower. And it's because of what he's done that anything significant takes place. I mean, he's amazing. He's amazing. You realize, even though he's not been walking this earth in 2,000 years, and he never traveled further than about halfway between here and San Antonio, he was a peasant carpenter. Did you know that even though that's the case, more books have been written about him than any other man and any other movement in history? More artwork has been dedicated to him and his movement than any other person or movement in history. More songs are still being written all the time about him and his movement than any other thing. It's significant. That's why the church is the number one health provider in the world today. Yeah, it is. So we could talk about that stuff and talk about, you know, the impact that church made. But I want it to be a little more personal this morning. I want us to kind of get down and have a more individual kind of feel. And so I'm going to tell you a story, okay? And while I tell you that story, I want you to go ahead and turn to two passages, because at Sugar Grove we're going to stay really tight with the Word of God. Okay, that's important to us. So two passages. One of them is Philippians 2. It's verses 1 through 8. And so that's the first one we'll look at. The second one is going to be Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 20. And if you don't have your Bible with you or your phone or whatever it is, we're going to show those on the screen here in just a second. But those are the passages we're going to look at. But to help us kind of get down and answer this question, what difference does church make? I want to tell you a story. This is a story I read a long time ago. I was probably in high school. And I had forgotten about the story. I hadn't forgotten the story, but I'd forgotten about it. Does that make sense to you? Until I was reminded of it by a fellow named Hartgrove about almost a year ago, I guess, because it turns out he's read the same story. He said when he was 13 or 14, he had read this story, and as he began to unpack it, I thought, oh yeah, I'd forgotten about the story, but I know the story really well because it had made a real impact. It really punched me pretty good. So I want to share a little bit of that with you to kind of set this stage here. It's a story about a dog, all right? And it was a dog that belonged to a young married couple that lived in an apartment in the city, okay? And they had him since he was a puppy. These were the only people that he knew, all right? The only thing he knew about other people was who he would see on a leash when they would take him out and that sort of thing. So this was it. This was his world. This was the dog's world, these two people in this apartment. And when he was a puppy, no real problems. But you know what puppies do? Yeah, they do. Yeah, they grow up. And this thing grew up to be the size of a small pony. It was a Great Dane, right? So pretty soon, it took up a lot of room in that apartment, and so they're all kind of crunched and cramped, and all of a sudden it's not as attractive as it used to be, but the dog didn't know anything about that. He just loves his peeps, and so here you go. So they go on vacation to North Dakota, a very isolated part of North Dakota. In fact, they had driven for a long time and not even seen another car. When the husband begins to talk, he begins to kind of unload with his wife a little bit, and he says, you know, there's no way we ought to keep him in the apartment. We're doing him a disservice by keeping him in that apartment. He was made to be in the outdoors and the wide open spaces. And you know what we ought to do? We just ought to leave him here so he can be all that he wants to be. Well, she didn't like that idea at all. It's not a good idea, okay, just so you and I know. She didn't like it at all. But the more he talked about what he was built to be and how he's out there in the wild and roaming the plains and doing all this stuff, the Great Dane, she reluctantly agreed. So they left him a bowl of water, left him a bowl of dog food, and left him. Now, when he first gets out of the car, he's pretty excited about all of it because it's new smells. You know how dogs are. And they'll run and smell this, and they'll run and sniff that. And then he looks up, and the car is leaving him. And at first, it's not anything that concerns him. He's running after the car, kind of like, hey, wait, you forgot somebody. And the more he runs, the further that car gets away, and anxiety begins to sit in on him because he's never had this experience. He's never been left. And before you know it, that car is just a little dot on the horizon. He's running for all he can run. The car disappears. He still runs, never taking his eyes off the horizon. He runs and he runs till he can't run anymore. He just can't. And he sits down, but he never takes his eyes off the horizon. Now, it's early fall. It's already getting cold in North Dakota at nighttime. So he sits there. He does not move. He keeps his eyes focused, shivering all night long. He can't sleep anyway because there are coyotes in the distance and there are other sounds and smells that he knows absolutely nothing about. The only thing he knows just drove off and left him. So he spends the entire night. Next morning, sun comes up, but no peeps. Now, to make a long story short, this goes on for a while, okay? Days go by. The dog is starving to death. He's starving. When he wanders upon a little flock of sheep, and he feels something on the inside. He had never felt it before because he'd never killed anything in his life. Food had always been provided, right? But here he is starving, and so something is going on the inside. So he goes down and he kills a lamb and he eats it. And about the time he eats it, the rancher comes over the hill in his pickup truck. And he gets out, and the dog looks up. And what he sees is, thank you, a human being, finally a human being, something that I know. And he's just so filled with, he starts running toward he thinks he's going to establish some kind of contact. He's running with paws outstretched, sort of, if you can get that image in your mind. And so here he goes. But what the rancher sees is a dead lamb and a dog with blood all over him and a predator to his livelihood. So he reaches into the truck and he pulls out a shotgun. And he takes a bead and he shoots that dog. Does not kill it, and does not mortally wound it, but it stings him. And so here's a new experience. He hears the boom of the gun. He feels the burn of the bird shot, and he smells the gunpowder. And all of a sudden, it's not what he thought it was. He's confused and frightened. He runs off. He runs off, not at all understanding what just happened. Well, the rancher goes off. And he says, we got to do something about this because we got a predator and this is our livelihood. So he goes to the other sheep ranchers in the country, in the valley, the canyon, wherever it was, and we got to do something. And they agree. So they're going to go kill the bad dog. And so they get their horses up and they get their supplies and they get their plans and off they go. Now here's the part that really got me about the story when I was a kid reading it. It still gets me, to be honest with you, is this dog was so desperate for companionship. He so craved to be with these people, these men, that in spite of the fact that they were out to kill him, in spite of the fact that they had hurt him, at nighttime he would creep into their camp and just walk around. He would sleep by their tent on the outside just to be near them. If they had not gone to bed yet, he would lay out in the shadows just beyond the circle of light provided by the campfire and listen to their voices because it was soothing to him, made him think of home. He knew he'd been wounded. He could not go in there, but he would lay there and he would whimper, looking at these guys, wanting to go stick his nose up under one of their calloused hands and feel the weight of it on his head because that was home. Now, Hartgrove said that when he read that and when he was 13 or 14, he said he wept. I never cry. Actually, I do sometimes. I don't remember what I did, but I want to tell you even now, I mean, that story touches me. Now, why is that? Why do I feel so about that? Now, well, you're a dog lover, Mark, and I am a dog lover. And Karen's a dog lover. In fact, one of the conditions we had before we got married is to make sure we were both dog lovers. We were halfway to the altar once we realized, okay, we're both dog lovers. This is great. So we are, but I don't. Is that why I'm feeling what I feel about that story as I think about that dog? Because I'm a dog? No. Maybe a little bit. But some of you have not dog lovers. You haven't had a dog since you were a kid, and you feel something stirring in your busty old innards as I tell that story. What is it? Well, here's what I think it is, and I'm going to tell you about me. If it fits you, okay. But I bet it does. If I had to bet, I'd say, yeah, it fits you as well. Here's what it is. At some level, I identify with that dog because I have felt rejected. I have felt left out. I have felt forsaken. I have felt forgotten. And even if you've never felt those things, there is a sense within you that if people really knew you, they'd pull away so fast, they'd stick your bowl of water out and pull away so fast from 0 to 60 in about 2.3 seconds. See, really, it's not a story about a dog. It's a story about humanity. It's about me. And I'm going to say it's about you as well. We know what that feels like. Now, remember the question we're looking at. What difference does church make? There's a lot of things, but down, specific focus, you and me. You know what church is? Church is a place where I get to come together and realize and live out my purpose in life. My purpose in life is to love and be loved. Thought about this a lot, thought about it long. Looked at Scripture. I believe that's why we're here. And church provides an opportunity like nowhere else for you to live out your purpose with dignity and with meaning. In fact, that's the eternal purpose of church. That's why Jesus came, was to make a community where people can be together like that. See? To love and to be loved. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so what that means is that me and all of my brokenness and all of my gimpiness, I get together with other people that are just as gimpy as I am, and we're all in recovery. Right? We're all in recovery as God does His thing. And if you think you heard me say that there's just gimpy people in church, well, you're right. You heard me right. You know why? Because everybody in the whole world is gimpy. Everybody's gimpy. It's not just you. Everybody's gimpy. And we need each other. Church is the proclamation of God to the unseen realm that He can pull people together. And the more unlike each other we are, the greater is the glory to God. Y'all hear what I'm saying? Now, let's look at two passages. First one is Philippians 2. It's a familiar passage to us here at Sugar Grove because we look at it periodically. But I thought it'd be fitting for us to look at it on National Back to Church Sunday. Okay? Philippians 2, starting in verse 1, Paul's describing church. All right? And he says, if. Now, don't be thrown by that. He's talking about things that really are. It's a rhetorical statement, okay? If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from His love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. Now, by the way, did anybody read a word in there that you don't like? Does anybody in here say, I've had enough encouragement, I don't want anybody else to encourage me? Anybody? I've had enough love. I don't want any more love. I don't want to show it. Has anybody? I've had enough of this unity. I've had enough being together. I don't need that. Don't want it. No. These are the things, y'all, that are in the longing of your heart. This is the longing of my soul. This is what I'm built to be about. And you know what he's describing here? Church. And here's what he says. Verse 3. Here's the directives to all of us that are church, right? Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Here's the marching orders from God to His people. You do not act selfishly. You always act in behalf of others. And in fact, he puts more light on it. Verse 4, each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Now, why would anybody do that? Especially in the world that we're living in. Well, I want to tell you why. It's because we're not the ones that give ourselves definition and meaning. But it's the head of all this. It's Jesus. So he says in verse 5, your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. And by attitude, he means your posture, your position in life. Here's how you approach life. Who, being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. The notion is that here he is, and this is the part that I love, and you've heard me talk about it before if you've been a member here very long at all. Here he is, God in the flesh. He's the boss of everything, and he lays all of it down. He lays all of it down for me and you. That's the model. That's what difference does church make? Oh my. When you can love and be loved like that, it changes everything. You might say, yeah, but I've never seen a church like that. I mean, there's an ideal, but no, that doesn't exist anywhere. Yeah, it does. It exists here. Not perfectly. We're not perfect by any stretch. I don't mean to say that. But I want to tell you, that's our goal and that's our aim and that's what we intentionally are about. To love and to be loved. Each other and the community around us. That's exactly what we're about. I know that's what we're made for. And if that's not, and there's nowhere under the sun, where you can realize your potential in meeting that purpose like there is right in church. Talk about a difference. Wow. Nowhere like right here. And if there was any place else, Kiwanis Club or whatever it might be, if there was any place else, then what Jesus said in John chapter 13 is not true, not even close to true. what he says in John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. He says, all right, kids, a new commandment I'm giving to you. All right? And so everybody gets their pencils out and their pads out. New commandment. He's going, okay, the captain is speaking. Here we go. New commandment. That you love one another. And they're thinking, oh, Jesus. That's not new. We've known about that since Leviticus 19, the holiness code. He says, yeah, I want you to love each other the way I have loved you. And if you do that, everybody will see that and they'll say, ooh, there's something going on here because we've never seen anything like that anywhere else. This is where it happens. Because we become like Him. Now hold all that just for a second and go to Colossians 1. That's where Paul's talking about us. He's talking about this church, this collection of people that loves each other and loves those around them. He says in Colossians 1, it's a place called Christology. It's a place where he gives a high doctrine of Jesus. And here's what he says, starting in verse 15. Speaking of Jesus, he says, He is the image of the invisible God. Now that's just sort of a funky way of saying He's God in the flesh. We can't see God with our physical eyes, right? But He is, as a human being, the physical manifestation of God. He's an exact representation of God in every way. He's also, he says, the firstborn over all creation. That doesn't mean He's the first one to be created because He's uncreated, right? He's God, always was. What do you mean by that then, verse 16? By Him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth. In other words, He's the agent of everything. Everything you see came through Him. Visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authority. All things were created by Him, and get this, and for Him. That's why when you go to the beach and you see that beautiful sunrise, when you go to the mountains and you see all those canyons, or you look into the face of a little old baby like my grandson, you look in there and you say, are you looking at that little old granddaughter, Darla Mae, and something stirs on the inside. There's something deeper and richer and beyond everyday experience. You're seeing a reflection of Him. It was made for Him. It is for His glory, right? And then he says it in verse 18. And in addition to all that, He is the head of the body, the church. So you can't really be a nun. Hang on to Jesus and not the body. We're inextricably connected. He's the one that calls the shots. He's the boss, see, of all of this. Because look at verse 20. Through Him, God, or verse 19, God was pleased to have all His fullness dwell in Him, and through Him to reconcile to Himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through His blood shed on a cross. We're nothing without Jesus. He's the heart of it. He's the center. There's a fellow named, that is right, there's a fellow named Richard Moo. He's the former president of Fuller Theological Seminary out in Pasadena, California. Years ago, he and his wife had been invited to a national prayer breakfast in Washington, D.C. He said it was something. He said, here we are in this great big huge banquet hall. And he said up on the platform there was a table and the dignitaries were up there. President Bush was up there. George Sr. was up there with his wife, Barbara. His Vice President, Dan Quayle, and his wife were up there. General Colin Powell was there. Congressmen and all kinds of folks were up there. He said the atmosphere was just electric at this national prayer breakfast. And they had a perfect sight. They were sitting kind of at the front of this banquet hall. They could see everything up there so well, so clearly. They were sitting at a table with a young Muslim from a Middle Eastern country, and he was an ambassador, actually, from one of the Middle Eastern countries. So they made small talk, and they said, Richard asked him, he said, well, how long have you been over here? And he said, well, a little less than a year. He said, okay. He said, well, let me ask you this. He said, what does it feel like to be living and working in our nation's capital? What does that feel like? He kind of leaned forward and he smiled a little bit and he says, we're not really supposed to say this, but he said, this is a wonderful place to be. And then he leaned a little further in. He looked about just a little bit and he said, Washington is the center of the universe. I appreciate his sentiment. But there's something wrong with his map, isn't there? Washington, D.C. is not the center of the universe. We just read about the center of the universe. He who is in the image of the invisible God. the one through whom all things, visible and invisible, things in heaven and things on earth, all things, the firstborn of all creation, the head of the church, the one through whom all reconciliation occurs because he shed his blood. There's the center of the universe. And if he's the head of the church, you know what that means? Wherever he is, church is. When you came to church this morning, you didn't just come to church. You came to the center of the universe. This is the focus. This is it. I see we sometimes forget that. And when you forget that, things kind of shift around, don't they? I don't know if you ever heard, how many people ever heard of William Randolph Hearst? See your hand? Yeah, the newspaper mogul. All right. And this guy was so rich. I mean, y'all, he was just stinking filthy. Whatever word you want to stick on there, rich, whatever he wanted. And he was into art. So he read about this piece of art that he wanted, really, really wanted. So he calls his agent in. True story, you can't make this stuff up. Calls his agent in and says, I want you to track it down. Go find it, and whatever they want for it, pay it. I want it in my collection. So the agent says, okay. And he's gone for months because, you got to track down, well, this owner was here and then it went to this. And so you're trying to track it down and do all this stuff. Finally, after months, he comes back to William Randolph Hearst. And he says, Mr. Hearst, I found it. And William said, great. He said, where is it? And the agent said, Bill, it's in your warehouse. He had bought it a long, long time ago and forgotten. And there it was, sitting in his little thing all along the way. Now, something's wrong with that picture. What's wrong with that? Same thing that's wrong with the picture of folks that forget who they are and where they are when they're hooked up with church. Make a difference? Oh, yeah. Now, here's the thing. I don't know why you're here this morning. I know why some of you are here, yeah. But some of you I don't. I don't know why you're here. Maybe you're here because Grandma's in town and she wants you to go to church somewhere. Okay, maybe that's it. Maybe you're here and it's all hooked up for you. You've hooked up with God and everything is good. And I love that. I'm so glad. But maybe you're here and you need Jesus to make a difference in your life. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is the power that lives in the hearts of believers. Yeah. Maybe you're on the outside. You feel like you're on the outside looking in. You've always felt that way. Or maybe it's your past. It's so complicated and messy. I'll tell you what, Jesus makes the difference in all that. Because I want you to look at something here. Paul says it, 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 17. Let it just sort of fill your heart. Y'all see that?
The light.
Brand new.
The light.
Old is gone. New has come. That's why it's called the new birth. Baptism is referred to as the new birth because you're recreated spiritually. God does something with that hand of His and recreates something new inside of you. Here's the dilemma that we face. Everybody in here has a sense of loneliness. Cosmic loneliness. Sometimes we wonder if we're the only ones in the universe. And really what we're wondering about with all of that, when we have those problems connecting, what we're wondering about, is there anything that's meaningful in life? Is there anything that has purpose in life? Is life meaningful? Is life purposeful? Well, I'll tell you honestly, apart from Jesus, I'm going to say no. Meaning, purpose lies only with Him. But here's where the real part of the dilemma kicks in. You know down in your soul, you're not worthy of Him. I'm not either. None of us are. There's stuff that you've done, and you know that you've done it, and there it is in front of you. There it is. And it's between you and God. And you know what our normal tendency is to do? It's to run and hide. It's to withdraw, shut the curtains, pull back, we run and hide. And sometimes it can become such that we are so running away. I mean, we'll even change belief systems to justify all of that. It's crazy. The heart of the matter is this. You need Him, and He wants you. So you come to Him, and you lay it all out there. And some people say, He says to you, oh, that's okay. I understand. That's not exactly right. What He says is, no, that's not okay. And I'm glad that you came and told me about it. But let me tell you what I've done. I've sent my son to die. He died at Calvary, paid the penalty for that so you can be with me. And not only that, but any sin you do after that, He's going to take care of that. You stay faithful. You know what that is? That's good news. That's good news. Connection to Him. By the way, y'all want to know what happened to that dog? I won't tell you if you don't want. Anybody want to know? Let me see your hands if you want to know what happened. Okay. Randy was in first service too. He's a slow learner. He wants to for God. I love my brother Randy. There was a guy in that posse that began to suspect the dog was hanging around, sleeping out there by the tents and whatever. So he began to leave a little food out. And the dog would eat it. And the dog could smell his scent on the food. One day this guy is out in heavy brush. He is attacked by a wolf. Guess who saved him? Guess who'd been out there paralleling every movement? Guess who jumped in and saved him? Yeah. Wounded. Horribly wounded. All the other ranchers come up and say, wow, well, the wolf is taken. Let's put him out and we'll go home. Let's shoot him and we'll be... And the guy said no. He nursed him back to health, brought him home, and that's where he lived out his days. Now, you know what that is? That's the story of redemption. When you think nobody else will have you, God always has. And through His kids, there's a whole new avenue and vista of living out this business of love. Absolutely. He takes us home. Now, you might need to think about all this for a while. That's great. We'll be around. Call me up sometime. We'll chat about it some more. But if you have something you want to share with the body this morning, anything, let us know about it.